I'd like to call the Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee for Thursday, October 5th, 2023 to order. First item is Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next item is adoption of the agenda. Need a motion to adopt.
Zinner, support.
Moved by Commissioner Romano, supported by Commissioner Zinner. Any changes or additions to the agenda? Seeing none, please vote.
Yes.
Sabatini, yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 13-0.
Next item is approval of minutes dated September 19th, 2023. Need a motion to approve.
So move, Perna.
Support Nard.
Moved by Perna, supported by Nard. Any changes to the minutes, corrections? Seeing none, please vote.
And Sickle, yes.
Motion passes 13-0.
All right, next item is public participation. This is the first opportunity for public participation for those who would like to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes on an item which is on today's agenda. There'll also be a second opportunity for public participation for those who would like to speak on any issue. Would anyone like to speak during public participation, agenda items only? Going once, twice. We'll close public participation. Next is presentations. This is item 6A, which is the 2024 Executive Recommended Budget and Capital Plan. I need a motion to receive and file.
So moved by Nard.
Moved by Nard, supported by Romano. I'd like to welcome our county executive who is here, as well as his team, and Steve, Finance Director. County Executive, great to see you. Thank you for accepting an invitation. I know we always don't agree on all of our items, but doing this process in a professional manner and respecting each other is so important in my eyes, and we're so glad that you're here.
Thanks, Joe, and I appreciate the invite. And Don, obviously, was the one that reached out, and I know you were very supportive of that, as well as Harold, and the rest of us, I think, welcome that opportunity. Normally, I think most people realize how we were accustomed to dealing with the budget was basically with the board chair, actually the vice chair, and even the whoever the chair of the budget committee happened to be for finance would meet after we prepared the budget and have a conversation. And that would usually get brought back to the rest of the board so that they can digest the budget and kind of figure out what our thoughts were. But I think Don this time had recommended saying, you know what, why don't you just come and just say it in front of everybody, kind of what we normally talk about in those meetings. And I thought I'm more than willing to do that and to kind of give you some high profile, high level conversation about where we're headed with the budget and some of the concerns or things maybe we need to think about. So again, this is just a recommended budget on behalf of the county executive and the staff that we had put this budget together. And we know that your job moving forward will be to make a determination as to what the final outcome of that budget will be. And so we want to be supportive in that process, as we always have. We make ourselves readily available for any and all questions or conversation you may have. Not just here at your meetings, but obviously at any point in time you realize, hey, there's something I'm concerned about, I have an issue with, I'd like to discuss, or maybe we can do something different or better. Please feel free to reach out to myself personally, as well as obviously anyone from my staff. So I welcome that. But just kind of give you a high profile look at the budget itself. We know we're pretty fortunate if you think about, you just turn on the TV. I don't know many of you that do that anymore. I really don't, unless I'm watching sports and or some other one of those crime series TV shows. But for the most part, you see what's happening in Washington. You see what's happening even at the state level and obviously even some local units of government, the challenges they face. And I don't think we really see that here. We've been very fortunate. You know, it's the 13th budget we're putting forth and presenting, and we've been very fortunate. Although we may squabble over a few little items, and I even using that term, because it's always want to focus on the negative or focus on the issues that we disagree upon. You know, as Joe had mentioned, the bigger challenge is, I think, looking at the budget in its entirety and its totality, we have been pretty successful in putting a structurally balanced budget for the voters here to have them understand that we do care about the services that are provided and that we're funding things that we believe are necessary and supporting those that are responsible for providing those services, whether it's a department head and or obviously a countywide elected official. And so we've gotten by with an incredible outlook for our budget. And I don't know that many municipalities can say they're 100% funded when it comes to retiree health care. I don't know many can say that they actually have the funding set forth to make sure that they're taking care of any liability like retiree health care. We've been able to do that and maintain funding to support our capital projects, as well as obviously making sure that any type of increases that we need for our employees, we're able to make those compensations available to them. And that's kind of where I want to focus my attention on. If you think about, where we're at right now, the working relationship has been incredibly well, but I think there's one thing I hope we can all agree upon. And, it's the issue that we're dealing with right now when it comes to our workforce and the employees that work for us here in the county government. I think we would all pretty much agree that we need to take care of them, and we need to be very mindful of what's happening, not just within county government competing with one another with our budgets, but we need to start looking at what's happening with the workforce in general. And today, as we sit here and have conversation, we got relatively low unemployment, 3.8% unemployment rate. Fluctuates, usually on a weekly, monthly basis. Our workforce itself right now here in Macomb County, we are actually almost historic highs, 440,000 people in our workforce. And that's an incredible testament to the number of jobs that are available and folks that are actually willing to work. We do have a concern with the birth to death ratio. We're seeing that obviously that has reversed itself. We haven't seen that in, I don't know, decades, where there's more deaths than there are births. And so that is a concern moving forward. And with that being said, the jobs available right now in Macomb County in every industry sector, as we sit here today, about 48,000 jobs available in Macomb County. So we're competing not only with other government entities for those that are providing services as workers, the workforce that we have, but we're also competing with the private sector with jobs that are available there as well. So we need to make sure that we're going to continue to invest in our employees. And again, the retention is incredibly important, as well as obviously attraction. We know there's some areas that really need a focus, and we're planning on doing that. Public safety and the 24/7 operations. Former life and law enforcement, I did the job because I loved it. But let's face it, today we have found that it's been incredibly challenging for public safety, and I'll specifically talk about the sheriff because we've had many conversations. I've been fortunate throughout this process to talk to all the county-wides, to talk to all the department heads. But one area I see that is a big concern for us, and one that we really need to start focusing on, and how do we provide the support funding-wise, is the sheriff's office. They have a lot of jobs openings available in pretty much every aspect of what the sheriff does, and we need to figure out how do we become more competitive. But to become more competitive, we need the funding to make sure we can do that. And at some point in time, there is going to be some kind of a determination, whether it's some kind of a contractual agreement, or if there is some binding arbitration that comes about. We need to be very supportive of that, and I know that I will be incredibly supportive to try to figure out how do we get there. And that is going to be something we need to be prepared for beyond just the 2024 budget. So what you're seeing here today, we got to look at this with a mindful approach towards beyond 2024. Whatever we're doing for this budget cycle, we need to make sure it's sustainable. And yet, we know we have money available. We can't just say, let's hire new employees or add more employees. You think about it, the last two budget cycles, 2022 and 2023, we've added approximately 137 employees. Approximately 137 employees, 2022 and 2023. Now, some of them were direct out of general fund. Some of them were supported by grants. Some of them were a hybrid between grants as well as general fund dollars. Looking forward, and I had the opportunity, as I mentioned before, not only to talk to department heads as to where we need to go, and we need to be supportive of the budget holistically. We need to realize that we all share this budget. It is all our responsibility. So it's not a kind of a zero-sum game where somebody wins, somebody's going to lose. And we don't want to see that. And I think every one of the department heads said, you know what, we see that. We'd like to have more people. We'd like to have more support. We'd like to have more funding. But we think we can continue to deliver the service that's necessary. And you're going to hear that from them when you have your meetings and you bring them in and have those conversations. You're going to hear it pretty much from every department head that works from the county side, my executive form of government. They're going to be telling you, yes, we can do with what we have. Could we use more? Absolutely. But we don't want to do that at the risk of someone else losing out of this. And so talking to the county-wides, and I did have a conversation with all of them about 2-3 weeks ago. I brought in every one of the county-wides and the chief judge of the circuit court, and we sat down and we had this very conversation I'm having here with you today about the future and the concerns we have, and pleading with them to make sure that if they're doing something, they're doing it within their own budgets. They're taking a look and trying to figure out how do we not go after the general fund to support more of the need that we have. If there are grants available, I'd be very much inclined to say, okay, let's look at that. If it does require some general fund match out of county dollars, I'd be somewhat supportive of doing that. However, we need to really look at what the needs are versus wants. Because even adding more employees taxes on the support services we have, whether it's Carlin in HR, whether it's the finance department with Steve, our folks that are working, Ben, in the facilities and operations, or even Jaco in IT. Every one of those areas and beyond are supporting the workers that are here. So if we're adding more employees, obviously that adds to their workload, and that becomes somewhat of a concern. They're gonna do it, they're gonna get the job done, but understand that that sometimes creates a challenge because of the necessity of their time to deliver the service they need to internally within our organization. So I think pretty much having that conversation with all the countywides, they were in agreement as well. And I found it interesting that two of them already had come up with an idea as to what they think they could do within their budget cycle. One of them was the, obviously, Candace Miller, our Public Works Commissioner, worked with our finance department and said, listen, I'm gonna make a quick change. I do need to hire somebody, but I think I can make this revenue neutral, which was something that we obviously will continue to support. I'm all for that. A few of our department heads had done the same, and we're supportive of that as well. So again, I can't help but use this terminology, zero-sum game. We all own this budget. It is a responsibility for all of us to realize the importance of, one getting something and another not, does take away a service level that's going to be provided, whether externally to the public or internally to ourselves in getting the responsive nature that we need from the various departments that service us. And, with that being said, I think pretty much everybody has been on board with that. This idea that investing in our employees is gonna necessitate a contractual agreement. Obviously, we've been very fortunate with our current employees. We've decided to up there, and the response I got from this and working with Carlin and Steve was incredible. Obviously we were thinking about a 3% raise, and we realized that is not competitive. In comparison to what's happening around, the entire, I'm going to say just Michigan, but even around the country, you're seeing obviously pay scales going up, and people are getting paid more for what they're worth. And we're seeing that here in Macomb County. We need to make sure that we understand and recognize the worth of our people by paying them more for what they're doing. And they were incredibly grateful for that, obviously, the increases that they've just recently seen. But I do believe this challenge is going to continue. There are some things that we need to worry about, concerns moving forward. It's the economy. The economy is going to have an impact on what we're doing. The cost of goods, the cost of things that we actually need sometimes as far as purchasing is going to be somewhat of a concern for us. Revenue sharing. We've been very fortunate with revenue sharing at the state level. We've seen some increases, but that's not something that I would sit back and think that that's going to be sustainable forever. We need to be very cautious of what comes back our way, and obviously that's on the revenue side of what we bring in here to the county. The support we've gotten with some of the grants that have come our way from the federal government as well as the state. I mean, let's look at our capital projects. I mean, how fortunate were we to work together to really figure out how do we solve a problem that was a major concern for us since 2005 that we've been talking about, and that's that jail. I can't be more thankful for this board securing the funding that we had from that ARP funding and realizing there's an important opportunity for us that we can't miss out. Had we missed out on this, the biggest challenge we would have had is a continuation of the problem that we're seeing over at that jail. Not being able to address something that's important to me, and I hope to every one of you, mental health and substance abuse, but also it was an infrastructure need that one of our countywide elected officials is responsible for providing that security for. But it is our responsibility to provide him the correct type of facility to manage the care of those individuals. Well, putting aside the $140 million and then going to the state and getting the other $40 million to support that, and knowing that we put money aside to deal with capital projects to add to it so that we can work on this $240 million facility is incredible, because it's something we're not going to have to worry about as far as bonding and a continued liability on our books if and when we decided to build such a facility. It is not going to be a liability on our books. We figured out how to pay for that. And with that, on a smaller scale, obviously the Marine Division, that is soon going to be handed over to us, probably within the next month or two, and you'll all be invited to be a part of that ribbon cutting. But that is a state-of-the-art facility, recognized, or going to be recognized by pretty much every law enforcement agency in the state, and I dare say across the country. Incredible, the asset that we have here, but once again, paid for by making sure we were doing the right thing with our finances. And so, with that being said, we need to be concerned or cautious, because I don't know that we're going to be gifted with those opportunities in the future from the federal government or the state. I think they are going to be very challenged with their budgets and their finances moving forward. That is very concerning to, I think, many of us. And I'm thankful on the 911 surcharge, the movement to allow for another year. But let's think about that. If for some reason that is decided that the board doesn't want to move that forward, that's going to be a concern. If it's something that you decide it needs to be put forth as a vote of the people, and the people decide that they don't want to support that, which I don't know that they would. I think they would be very supportive. They are here in Macomb County. People are incredibly supportive of public safety. They have been, and I think they're going to continue to be. And so I think even if it was on a ballot, I do believe it would pass. However, I thought that many years ago when we were looking for a new 800 megahertz radio station system that many of you weren't a part of, but I was intimately involved in because we had what was called an old 400 system. And I'd asked for the funding at that point in time, and we were given the option of saying, no, we're going to put that on a ballot. And it was put on a ballot, and it was 2 years after I got elected sheriff. I thought I got unelected as sheriff because it went down. Not quite as bad as Proposal 1 that Governor Snyder had put forth on road funding, but it was pretty abysmal. I was surprised by that vote, and because I don't think people really understood the nature of it. But came back 2 months later to the board to request that support. And what we did was, in working with that then Director of Finance, Dave Deagle, they figured out how to fund it. But again, it came out of the county tax dollars to figure out how do we fund and support one of the greatest interoperable radio systems in the entire state of Michigan we have here now in Macomb County for police, fire, and EMS. And again, I say that because it was put on the ballot, it was denied. But if we are to do the same thing here with the 911 surcharge, if it is denied, there is still a bill to be paid. We're still having to figure out how do we support the current staffing levels and the support that we give to those that are working in a 911 dispatch center, which I attest is probably the most significant, important connection we have to the public if and when there's an emergency need. So those are things we need to be mindful of moving forward. Maintaining the healthy fund balance is important to all of you. I know specifically to Joe, because he talks about it all the time. But with that being said, it is important to make sure, because you never know if there's a crisis, a major incident, or something happening, or we decide that there is some kind of a contractual agreement that comes about, or if there is some kind of a binding arbitration that is something that benefits the law enforcement aspect or the police, the sheriff's department. We're going to have to figure out how do we support that financially. So having a fund balance moving forward is going to be critically important, and you're going to see that here in this budget. What we've put forth, and I think many of you have already had an opportunity to kind of peruse it. But as you drill down and start to want to know a little bit more and kind of get an understanding, please understand my biggest concern isn't so much just for 2024. I think we have submitted a balanced budget, added a very limited amount to the fund balance. But the reality is I think we have supported the services that are necessary, and everyone so far that I've talked to has been very supportive of obviously where we're headed, but with a mindful approach towards making sure we're taking care of our employees beyond just 2024, and we have the money and availability to do so. So with that, I'm really not here to give too many specifics. I think that's what I have Steve for. You guys can beat him up a little bit over the budget, the numbers, and crunch those issues as we always go through. I look forward to the healthy debate. I hope it continues to be very productive, and I think many of you know and have reached out. I've talked to many of you personally about some of the issues, and I thank you for that, reaching out and making those phone calls, because I am more than willing to continue those conversations. But understand that my entire staff is available to you if and when you have a concern that's regards to this particular budget that we're putting forth. So there's not a lot of fanfare, not a lot of excitement. There's not a lot of additions. And with that being said, I am not very interested in trying to figure out, as you see in this budget, how do we add more positions at a cost to the actual general fund. And if you think about the actual budget itself, you're talking about a $1.1 billion budget, just below. Another year, it's the second time we put forth a budget of $1.1 billion here in Macomb County. That's incredible. So, and a testament to, I think, many of you here in this room that kind of want to work through this to make sure that we're presenting a balanced budget, structurally balanced, but also one that provides the necessary services that the public is looking for. But yet out of that 1.1 billion, about 322 million is county general funds. And that fluctuates depending on the economy, depending on obviously taxes that come in, support we get from the state, federal government, and that will change year to year. And my concern is making sure we're looking at that and focusing on the future. So adding more positions, I don't think it's really necessary at this time. That was just my conversation with everybody. I think everybody else understands that. Working within your budget to figure out how do you manage your affairs, what is important to you, how do you restructure some of the things that you're doing. We all can do it. We've all done it. And I know there's a commitment on behalf of those departments working within the county executive role or responsibility. So with that, I want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak to you, kind of give you an insight as to what we're dealing with the budget as we present it here. And any further or more deep dive conversations, I will leave that to Steve and his team. But if there's any general questions or comments you'd like to make, I'd be more than willing to accept that if that's allowable by the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mark. I will take questions here for the executive, and then I believe Steve's going to be going through the full presentation of the budget. So, Commissioner Hall, you have a question for the executive?
Thank you, Chairman. First, Mark, let me say thank you very much for accepting the invitation to be here. A subject that you had spent a fair amount of time on was the resources that the sheriff needs. I've spoken to you, I've spoken to Mark Delden, I've spoken to Andrew, I've spoken to Tony, and in your dissertation, you said at some point in time we have to address that. When you had asked the question, what was the number one priority? Public safety. How do you see us? I'm sure you agree that point in time is now. With Tony having, I believe, 22, if not 23 open recs. How do you see us with the other local municipal police departments? We've got a big swap and trade and raid where some are offering pensions and health care. One of them is indicated if you're on the force for 5 years, your salary can get up to $100K. How do we compete with that in the sheriff's department, especially with you being the former sheriff?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And Carlin gets nervous anytime I'm talking about contracts or contract negotiations. I can just kind of feel the burn coming from her on this side. And so I have to be very somewhat cautious of some of my comments, but let me just suffice it to say this. Yes, you're right. From my former experience in law enforcement and the conversations with Tony, the biggest challenge he has is he would love to add more specialty units. He would love to try to deal with, the issues of those that are non-support payments. Have a set crew that goes out there that can do more surveillance. There's so many areas of interest, and obviously even those that we have open warrant files for. But his problem is he is obligated to make sure that he is hiring the people necessary to fulfill the contractual agreements that he has with many of the municipalities, and making sure he's staffing his primary responsibility, and that's the county jail, and taking care of managing the prisoner population. So with that, he has a lot of openings, and so the question becomes, how do we entice people to want to take those jobs? Back in the day, it wasn't much of a challenge because you were competing. You were competing for one position. You had like 40 people looking for one deputy job open. But now we've come a long way. We've been working with the labor groups and the unions that work in the sheriff's department, and some of the things that I'd hoped for back when I was a sheriff actually came to fruition now through Tony. And one of those is they are hiring corrections officers to be corrections officers. And some still have the option to become a deputy, but now they've been given the opportunity through negotiations to hire from outside. So if there's an officer that is retiring from another department looking for a second career, they have an option or opportunity to hire in working as a deputy. But even some of those incentives haven't really helped increase the enrollment, people that want to come in and look for those particular jobs. And we're up against municipalities. Some people wonder, well, how is it that Sterling Heights or the city of Warren can do that? Well, if you think about it, they have millages for police and fire, and they get supported. Many times when they put those millages forward, they get supported to help take care of the pensions, to help increase their wages. We don't have that luxury. So what are we doing? We're competing internally. So in other words, every time we hire another employee on the general fund, it pushes back the opportunity for us to figure out how do we better incentivize people to become sheriff's deputies here in Macomb County. Because we can't just increase the millage. We can't put it to a vote of the people. Well, they could, but it still would be somewhat of a challenge to make that happen. So the question becomes, everything we do internally, and I talk about that zero-sum game, has an impact not only by taking away a position from someone else, but preventing us from filling the positions that are critically important and we need to fill. So until Tony has the ability to work out some kind of a negotiation, whether it's a better compensation for the officers, retirement system, putting them back into a retirement system, we're going to continue to see this challenge moving forward in his under his leadership and within his budget. So my push, and we've been working on this with Andy McKinnon as well as Carlin, is to start working with those labor organizations under Tony's organization or within the sheriff's office to figure out how do we better incentivize people to want to become police officers here for the Macomb County Sheriff's Department, because unfortunately we're competing with other agencies, not just in Macomb County, but in and around the region. And so we are working on trying to make that happen for him. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Chair Brown.
Just want to say thank you for coming. Your presence here is greatly appreciated. We thank you for being here. Communication is always going to help the process, and we're glad that you're here. And we'll go on and carry on, and we'll get on with it. But thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it. It's I'm sure I speak for all of us, and we're glad to hear. It's easier for us to understand your budget recommendations. We're actually hearing from you, presented directly, and we'll keep the feedback open because that's the way it goes. So appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I appreciate it, Don, and I appreciate the continued conversation. I don't know many people know that, but it's like, sometimes it's 3-4 times a day we're having a conversation about something to figure out how do we resolve an issue or just some thoughts or ideas. So I truly do appreciate that, the working relationship. And as you notice, and I even bring it up, it's not about R's and D's. It's about this county and how do we move it forward, provide the services that are necessary. And I don't know, as I said earlier on, there are many other municipalities, whether it's local units of governments, counties, state, or even the federal government that works the way that we do. And so with that, it's because of the willingness on behalf of each and every one of you to set that stuff aside to figure out how do we provide the services that are necessary. So I appreciate your leadership on the board and helping make that happen, Don. Thank you.
Commissioner Song.
Chair. Hi, Mark. Thank you so much for being here, too. I echo that from my colleagues. You mentioned something really interesting. You talked about the declining birth rate versus the death rate, and I know that our residents are extremely proud to live in a county that is safe, that we, champion public safety. But with that in mind, what can we do as a county to support families? Because I think, during the pandemic, we saw that childcare was a huge issue, and the state is working really hard to remedy some of that. What can we do to whether partner with the state or as we look at this budget, how can we support families too?
Yeah, Commissioner Song, I appreciate that because, I tend to look at, Andrew Cox, who is now our Health and Human Services Director. And, I think if you see, where we're headed, Ed, who now is running our Macomb Community Action, he has done an incredible job in just a very short period of time with the outreach. But again, it all comes down to, the willingness on behalf of us to reach out to the locals and their willingness to want to work with us to try to figure out how do we resolve some of their issues within their various communities. I can't just go in there and tell them, here's what we need to do, here's how we're going to do it. But the reality is their working relationship has been incredible, and even at the state level. We're fortunate. I mean, here in Macomb County, whether it's our planning department under Vicki Rowinski, whether it's the support that we get from Health and Human Services, the direct connection we have with state and federal organizations to help figure out how do we solve problems and how do we provide better services. I use by way of an example, the issue we're dealing with our JJC right now. There have been some challenges, there have been some concerns. We're trying to figure out how do we help the state with some of the wards of the state that were in Wayne County that are now coming our way. But there are some challenges with the actual nature and the type of kids that are in these facilities, bless you. And so with that, our question and concern is, how do we better manage based upon some of the statutes that are out there? How do we better manage based upon some of the actual directives that are coming from the state, the care of the kids in those facilities to make sure that we're taking care of those that are in the facility and keeping them safe as well as our staff, when yet some of these new rules coming out were somewhat of a challenge and more protective of the kid who's becoming violent against the others. I say that because we've had incredible conversations at the state level, and with that, we've seen those issues become resolved. So our folks here in Macomb County have the outreach and the support. It's not always the answer of more funding. I think we can always take more funding, but if that is at the detriment of, someone else's budget or the detriment of, being able to hire, or I should say, being able to make sure that we're providing the level of funding for the type of workers we have, I don't know. That's something you're going to have to look at within this budget. If you see there's a need to put more money into a particular area, I got to believe that Scott, as well as Andrew, would come up here and say, yes, we'll gladly take it, but where are we taking it from? And who is going to be willing to step forward and say, you can take it out of our budget to support that service? That's the balancing act. And right now, I can tell you, both Ed and Andrew are satisfied, they can provide a level of service to each and every one of the communities. And if there's something specific you're looking for or looking at, please, by all means, reach out and have a conversation with them, and they will look to see what they can do to help better that service if necessary.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Zinner?
Thank you, Chair. I really appreciate your statement in regard to the possible decrease of grants and money coming in. That says it all, I think. I'm very concerned about it. I'm sure we all are. We watch the business reports. We see what's going on. We see the downgrade in the federal government. So I'm hoping we can all work together here, because we do work together for the best thing for our citizens and for our county. But I am very concerned about that also, and I'm glad that you explained it the way you did. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Romano?
Thank you, Chair. At my last meeting that I chaired, I think I made the comment on the commissioner's comments, and I said something along the lines of, it's nice that we as commissioners can agree to disagree. For me, it's comforting to know that there's a situation. In the time that I've been here, executive, it's the first time I've seen you. It's nice to see you here. But it's nice to know if I have a problem, we all have our agendas. Each one of us has our own personal agenda. And it's nice to know we can go to Chair Brown, and that conversation is open between, that line is open between you and him. It wasn't always like that, as you know, and Chair Brown knows. I'm giving kudos to him because he's opened that conversation. And as I said, we all have personal agendas, and it's nice to reach out to you or to the people that you designate to talk to them, whereas it wasn't that way before. And we do agree to disagree, but let's save a lot of money this year, no attorneys involved, and let's just go ahead and, let's just move forward. Thank you for coming. That's all I have, Chair.
Mark, you don't have to respond to that.
There you go. So,
But no, thank you very much. I don't see any other commissioners with questions. Thank you for being here. Thank you for giving us the high-level oversight of the budget. And yes, I will confirm, I always am concerned about the fund balance. So, but I know we'll have further conversations about a number of things, and I know all your department heads are always willing to listen to us and answer our questions and assist us in any way. So thank you again.
thank you for your time. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Steve, I think you have the floor.
He got his tie on today. We better watch out.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Schmidt, pull that microphone towards you, would you please? There you go.
Better?
Good.
Okay, good enough. Good afternoon, everyone. Before I start my portion of the presentation, I want to take an opportunity to recognize two folks in the audience from my staff. Most of you know Steve Adair. He's my Deputy Finance Director. You may not know Tanya Newman. She's the budget analyst. This is her first budget cycle, so learning experience for her. She's put in countless hours to compile the document, so I want to introduce her to you and thank her and Steve for their efforts to get this document in on time. As you know, we went live with the Workday product this week, so everything sort of culminated on September 30th. Yes, I'm echoing, I believe, am I not?
You're good.
Okay, so we will start on page 2 of the PowerPoint. This is basically the same format as it was in prior years. And as Mark had indicated, the total budget is just shy of 1.1 billion. It's down slightly from 2023, primarily because of the Department of Roads. As you know, the Mound Road project is nearing completion, so their budget for 2024 is about $101 million less than the 2023 budget. The next bullet there in the middle of the page, I just try to highlight the big programs in the county: mental health and substance abuse, of course, about $280 million. Roads, about $250 million. Again, that's down about $101 million from a year ago. And Macomb Community Action has about $59 million in various grant-funded programs. Those three programs, in addition to the general fund, comprise about 84% of the entire budget. So about $912 million between those three programs in the general fund. as Mark indicated, we were very judicious in how we added positions this year. We added a total of 18, all of which are at least 50% funded by grants. Majority of those are actually funded 100%. And we'll get to a schedule later on that spells out those 18 positions by department. Moving on to slide 3. A little more in-depth and highlights of the general fund, as Mark indicated. General fund's about $322 million, about a 5% increase, or 5.5% increase over the current year adopted budget. We've built in a 6% increase in property values for 2024. That's composed of a 5% inflationary factor and 1% for growth. We've built in 4% for 25 and 3% for 26. Be on the conservative side. Hopefully those numbers may come in higher, but we try to be conservative on those numbers. The 5% inflationary increase is pretty much a known factor at this point. That number is derived from the CPI from October of last year through September of this year. So we lag about a year on the inflationary impact on property tax values. Salary increase, as Mark indicated, we built in 6%. We've had significant benefit or favorable state revenues. So we built about $1.8 million increase in revenue sharing, $1.2 million increase over 23 for liquor tax, and about a $1.7 million increase in interest revenue due to favorable interest rates. We expect that to go down as time goes along in the next 2 or 3 years, as rates stabilize and as well as we spend our ARPA money in the next 2 or 3 years on the jail project and the $40 million to the Public Works Office for their projects funded by ARPA money. We've got about $6.1 million in capital projects for next year. The list is a little bit less than it was in prior years, and we'll talk about that when we meet with facilities and IT on their projects. Your office should have a copy of the entire capital plan. I've not included that in this presentation here. Moving on to slide 4. This is a schedule of expenses across all funds in the budget, and you'll see at the bottom, just shy of 1.1 billion, as I indicated previously. Some, kind of major swings in certain funds. You'll see again that $101 million decrease in the roads. Martha T-Berry's got about a 13% increase. Mr. Evans was here, I think, last month before you, indicating that the census was up quite a bit, so their 2023 budget was based on a census of 190 beds. They built their 2024 budget on 212, I believe it was 208 or 212. So that's that increase there. Public Defender's got quite a healthy increase. That's due to new funding from the state or additional funding from the state for defense attorneys. So that's driving that increase. If you have any other questions about other increases up and down the line here, feel free to ask today or reach out after the meeting, and we will be certain to do the necessary research to get you the answers you're looking for. Going to move on to page 5 here. This is a different look at the budget across all funds. This is by category, and you'll see that the personnel line item is gone up 6.8, or budgeted to go up 6.8% from 23 to 24, in line with our 6% increase. You always have folks moving their way through their step increments as well. Road construction and maintenance, that decrease is in the roads. Contract services, that's a combination of decrease in roads of about 18 million, and community mental health has an increase of about 34 million, or 32 million, pardon me, as they increase their services. They've had quite a healthy increase in their revenues, as Commissioner Kraft is well aware. So that's what's driving those changes there. The next two slides, I don't spend a whole lot of time on. They're just graphical representations of the previous slides. The first slide is all revenues, broken out by function. And the next slide after that is all expenses, in a pie graph broken out by category, if you will. You'll see that, contract services is quite a healthy piece, as well as salaries. Road construction is a major piece as well. So that just ties back to the previous slides. Head 2 slides to slide number 8. And this is the schedule of the 18 positions by department. So you'll see that we've added 3 positions in departments in the general fund. But those positions are almost, I wouldn't say exclusively, but significantly funded by outside sources. And then you have grant funds. We've added 15 positions there. What I'd like to point out here is that the total cost of those 18 positions is about 2.1 million. The general fund portion of those salaries is only about $552,000. Again, a lot of these grants are, or a lot of these positions are being funded 100% by grants. Now we'll move on to slide number 8. Now we're getting more into the general fund. Again, this is a schedule very similar to the prior schedule, showing revenues by source and expenditures by category. And again, you'll see personnel is showing an 8% increase. That again is a combination of the 6% salary increase plus folks working their way through their step grades. Utilities, about $1.7 million increase there. We've seen increases in utilities the last 2 years as rates go up, and I think as well as more folks are coming back into the office. What happened there was, and you'll see me at my finance committee in a week or two, Lynn Bricks came to the board, I think last December, may have been November, for a budget amendment to increase utilities by about $1 million. That was not built into the 2023 budget, nor had we amended the 23 budget yet. So I'm going to be coming to you again at my finance committee this month for a budget amendment to increase revenues, because we are going to be over budget in revenues. We're going to increase utility expense, increase funding for capital outlay. So just a kind of a look ahead for a budget amendment for 2023. And then repairs and maintenance, a 15% increase there. That's being driven primarily by increased costs in IT for the maintenance agreements on all the various network equipment and programs throughout the county. What you'll see is there's a schedule later on in this presentation that will break out the internal service charges. I know there's always some question about what's in internal services, what's it composed of, and then within that category is indirect cost charges, and there's a lot of questions about who gets charged what from what departments and for what services. And there's a schedule in this packet here of how those indirect cost charges are allocated out among the various departments, at least in the general fund. That's what I'm concentrating on here. So I see Commissioner Van Sickle shaking his head. We've had that conversation earlier this summer. So if that's not exactly what you're looking for, we can have a offline conversation to kind of clarify any questions you might have there. Again, the next two slides, 10 and 11, are just graphical representations of the revenues and expenses. You can see that on slide 10, property taxes are just under 50% of the revenues in the general fund. And as we move forward to slide 11, personnel expenses are about 55% of all expenses in the general fund. Slide 12 is a schedule that we typically prepare. Again, this is the internal service category in the general fund by department. And so that line item or that category is composed of 6 or 7 charges. Internally, there's a liability insurance charge that funds the liability insurance fund. There's property insurance, fleet insurance for those departments that have vehicles, chargebacks for copier rental, telephones being charged back, and then the last column is the indirect cost allocation, which you'll look at the bottom of that column. It's about $35.5 million. And the following schedule then breaks that out by department down the left side and the servicing department across the top. So that'll give you an idea of how the $35 million is allocated for services from, departments like purchasing, my office, treasurers, HR, county executive, so on and so forth. So again, it's a complicated schedule, a little bit busy, but if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out. Or you can ask today, of course. I may not have the answer off the top of my head, but if I don't, then we will certainly get you an answer. Slide 14 is a bar graph of our fund balance. And you can see at the end of 2022, the fund balance was about 45% of expenses. A healthy, good position to be in. We've talked about that before. It's going to go down slightly in 2022. It's a mathematical function because the fund balance isn't going up very much, but the expenses are going up. So I don't necessarily expect it to drop at the end of the day because, as you know, we typically run surpluses every year, and I expect to do the same this year. I don't know exactly, how healthy a surplus it'll be, but I do expect a surplus. So you can see we've stabilized between 35 and 40% for the next 3 or 4 years. So we're in a good position there. The next slide on page 15 is a schedule of taxable values and state equalized values. And the reason I include this here is to show the spread between taxable value and SEV. So of course, taxable value is what property tax bills are based on. State equalized value is 50% of the market value. Any spread there then gives us some protection in times of economic downturn where property values are going down, but we have some cushion there. So you can get into situations that we have before where property tax bills or property tax levies are actually going up by inflation necessarily, but property values are coming down. Once they meet, as you see back in 2010, 11, and 12, the two become equal, but you want a spread there, and we're at 34%, so we're pretty healthy there. So we have some downside protection if we have recession or some kind of economic downturn in coming years. The next several slides are meant to just demonstrate our debt position and our, bonded debt as well as pension and our legacy funding levels. So the next 2 pages are, 3 pages are all about debt. We have a very favorable debt profile, and I've mentioned that to you before. We only have 3 bond issues that are outstanding. We still have a few years of maturities left on the central campus bonds. They mature in 2030. And then we have 2 issues related to the retiree healthcare program that we began funding with a bond issue in 2015. So again, we have a very, very healthy or attractive, favorable debt profile. Schedule 16 only reflects principal payments outstanding by year. Page 17 includes the interest, so we're about $21.6 million in total debt service payments through 2030. Then again, you'll see beginning in 2031, the central campus bonds drop off, so our debt service goes down to just under $18 million, about a $3.5 million decrease there starting in 2031. Slide 18 is a graphical representation of slide 17. Again, sometimes picture's worth 1,000 words. So that's what slide 18 is meant to provide. And the next three are all about our pension and retiree healthcare programs. On page 19, it's a schedule of funding progress on the pension system. Very fortunate that as of the end of 2022, we were over 100% funded. We were at 101.6. You can see the year before, we were just shy of 105. Of course, we had a unfavorable investment year in 2022, but we are still very healthy at just over 102, or just under 102%. I'm going to move on to slide 20. This is the retiree healthcare plan for Martha T. Berry general and sheriff employees. Roads has their own. That's the last slide in the deck. But you'll see at the end of 2020, which was the last valuation year, we are at 73.1% funded. We've seen significant progress in the funding level of that program over the last several years. And Mark had indicated we were 100% funded. If you include the debt that we issued in 2015, then that puts us over 100%. The actuaries can't include that debt in their calculations because it's in a separate trust fund. So there's some accounting requirements that preclude them from including that. But if you were able to do that, we would be over 100%. Really favorable position to be in. We are a rarity, I would say, in being fully funded in our retiree health program. You can see on here, just going back 13 years, we were under 20%. And we've increased, and now we're able to provide 100% funding of the required contribution calculated by the actuaries from the bond proceeds. So that's what's helping our progress there. And the last slide in the deck is a funding schedule of funding progress of the roads retiree healthcare plan. They have been over contributing for a few years. So you can see they're at 127% at the end of 2020. So they're in a very favorable position as well. And Kyle's telling me that I need to like fast forward to roads. So with that, concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them today. If I can't, then I'll get back with you.
Thank you, Steve, for the presentation. We do have some commissioners that have some questions. So we'll start there. I do have some as well, but we'll start with you, Commissioner Van Sickle.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Steve. Very good presentation.
Thank you.
For the 1.8 million increase in revenue sharing, is that because the whole pot went up, or was, I seem to remember hearing the state was going to increase revenue sharing with the counties due in part to some of the Macomb Association of Michigan.
I think we built that in. We've got a 5% increase built in here.
Okay,
There was another 1% that was available, but we had to have our ARPA money committed by the end of this year.
okay,
That's not gonna happen. So we did not build that in here.
okay. And the 1.2 million increase in liquor tax, I hope that's because we don't have a lot more drinkers.
I can't comment on that, but I think what happened in fiscal '22 was the state had appropriated liquor tax contributions or distributions to counties and cities and villages. The collections that were coming in fiscal '22 exceeded their estimates, but they didn't go back to the legislature for the increasing the appropriation. So I think they carried that into 2022, or I'm sorry, 2023.
I'm glad we don't have a situation that's exasperating law enforcement's issues.
Yeah, I can't.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I can't comment on that.
Okay. On the 6.1 million in capital projects, does that include some monies for the intake center?
No. Did you know we rolled a lot of projects that were necessary at the jail on previous year's plans into the intake center project?
Okay. So we'll
About
be able to,
20, a little over 20 million, if I remember
so
correctly.
we'll be able to allocate some monies to the intake center out of previously funded sources, you're saying?
Correct.
Okay,
So, as you know, we can't, that project's being funded with ARPA money, some money from the state, and we estimate about $49 million of general fund balance.
maybe.
Yeah, so it'll be all wrapped into those numbers, primarily the general fund balance.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Quick question. Very good presentation, Steve.
Thank you.
Is there any revenue coming back from the state regards to medical or recreational marijuana to the county?
We got $725,000 this year. So
That's it?
it's based on, it's about 50 or 60,000, Steve, per facility for dispensary. I think we have 14 of them in the county, at least this year we had 14.
And does that go into our budget or is
It
that
does,
redistributed? Okay.
yeah, we built 700 and, I'm sure it's 725 or 750.
That's okay, I'll find it. I'm just following on
Yeah.
Don's question. Since he was concerned about the liquor, I was concerned about the other one. But thank you. That's
You're
all I
welcome.
have, Chair.
Commissioner Romano.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, I'm gonna go from a couple of pages that I have. I'm gonna go to the general fund budget, where we did an increase of 5% over 2023. Did our bond rating go up, or did we apply to have our bond rating go up?
We were rated in the summertime, it stayed the same.
I'm sorry?
We were rated in the summertime because we pledged our full faith and credit for a public works issue, and it remained the same. So we're AA plus, basically.
So it did go up,
Did not go up,
and we are currently at,
AA plus.
okay, and the other one was the salary increase of 6%. Is this across the board, personnel-wise?
Yes.
Okay, and last one is a 6.1 million in capital projects. Are there grants, you're giving this figure out now, is that with grants being applied for, or looking to the future that grants are going to be applied for? Or are any grants applied for?
We had,
Anything in the
Public
works?
Works has a grant. Most of that funding is coming from the general fund. I think there's 500,000 from other outside sources at this point. But we're always entertaining and looking for grants, for capital projects.
Okay, the 6% in salary increases, is that where coming up, you're equating the, coming up with a number of $13,291,000, is that? I'm looking here,
What page are you on, Commissioner?
I don't have pages on it, this is for general fund budget comparison by category.
That-
Page
yes, that
9, I'm
includes-
sorry, it is
that in-
page 9,
It is page 9, so that includes.
expenditures,
Yeah,
personnel.
that includes the 6%, that includes folks moving their way through their step grades, any associated fringe benefits with those movements, as well as healthcare increases.
It's all included.
It's all included.
Okay, and I think let me see what I got here for the last one. You told me when we refinanced, we did that summertime, and the last one I have is the retiree health thing. When we overfund that, and it is is it what did you just tell me that we were overfunded in the roads retiree? I'm on page 21. Department of Roads Retiree Healthcare Plan, that's overfunded, is that correct?
Correct.
Can we
At
use
the
the
end of
overfunding for
this-
anything else?
Pardon?
Can we use part of that overfunding for anything else, or do we have to, I mean, if we maintain it 100%, what do we do with the other 27%?
So what'll happen in the future is the roads will make lower contributions to that program as it moves along. So they'll have, in theory, other monies available to spend on other things. Can't take money out of that trust.
But you can reduce the amount of funding to it, so eventually it gets down to 100%, is that what you're saying?
And that's what happens with the pension plan, that's what'll happen with our retiree healthcare plan, that they're designed to do that, to end up at 100% or somewhere in that neighborhood.
So when old people like me croak, it's a good thing because it reduces the amount, is that
No
correct?
comment.
Okay, just want to make sure I got the right answer. Thank you, that's all I have, thank you, Chair.
Look for roads.
Chair Brown.
Thank you, Steve. Delinquent tax revolving fund's been tapped a little bit this year. Is that normal, or is that just something I have to be paying attention to this year? The contributions from the delinquent tax revolving fund to the general fund?
That went up about 175,000, so that, part of that's being used, that extra 175 is being used to fund the collections, half of a collection specialist in the treasurer's office, as well as funding for a new financial empowerment center at Macomb Community Action. That's at 175,000, so that's intended to continue.
It's not unusual, though. It's not unusual that we do that. I mean, we don't tap that very often.
We don't tap it very often. That contribution's been around 8 million for a number of years, countless years.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I don't see any other speakers, Steve, but I do have some questions for you. So in regards to the Department of Roads, the $101 million shortfall from this year compared to last year, is that attributed directly from the state?
State and federal.
State and federal?
Yeah. So that, their budget's on page D47. That's primarily driven by construction at on the Mountain Road project being almost complete.
Okay. So comparative to the previous year would probably be a better comparable, excluding that Mountain project.
There's some
Look at
large
the
swings,
differential.
yes.
Okay. The salary increase that's recommended for 6%, with the step-up system that we've developed and reclassified all the employees in different categories, theoretically, if someone is stepping up or moving into classification, they would get an increase of more than 6%, correct?
The way we do it, if you go into a new position, on Carlin, we usually calculate 5% and go to the next step. Yeah, 5% and go to the next increment. So depending on where you're at in your salary grades, it could be for individuals.
Okay. The contributions for the grants, that are here for the general fund contributions relative to those, so are those dollar for dollar matches in order to get those grants for the 552,000? In order to qualify for those grants, do we have to match them dollar for dollar?
Not on all of them, no.
Okay.
You'll see the ones, so friend of the court is a 66-34 split, juvenile court's 50-50, that's the youth home programs. JJC, same thing, state funds 50%. Prosecuting attorney, that's a combination of two grants. I think one's a 50-50 program, one's a 60-40 kind of a thing.
So they're all basically I'm looking at general fund
dollar
compared to
for
the
dollar,
grant,
you'll see the-
except for the prosecuting attorney grants,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah, Public Works, that's a station operator at the Chapton Pump Station, that's funded with Drainage District money.
To qualify specifically for those grants, I'm getting at the match comparative here.
Okay.
In order to qualify, for example, like the treasurer, I'm gonna use that one as the example because that's the first one on my list. In order for them to get that grant for $47,200, we have to match the $47,200?
No, that's a contribution that they're bringing in from the delinquent tax fund to fund that
Okay.
project.
I'll use the next one
I'm
as
sorry,
an
that
example.
position.
That one's a one-off, good one. How about the friend of the court, the 113.5?
Yeah, that's a 50-50 match.
50-50 match. Perfect. You said in regards to the one graph, how in regards to the fund balance as a percentage of expenditures, where the expenses are going up and the fund balance is going down. I just see obviously it kind of leveling off for the next 3 years. Is that something that we should be concerned about in, following these upcoming years here, like the next 5 to 10 years?
I would say we need to be watchful of it, for sure. We're still healthy at, 35%, 36%. Industry standards are 15 to 20%. So we're, high 30s, mid 30s, but we need to be very mindful of it going forward as, economic,
As
circumstances
the inflation
change.
charge changes and as that continues, to go,
Yeah,
everything is
exactly.
being driven up. Page 16, retiree healthcare refunding. So for that specific column in 2029 to 2035, obviously we've got a jump there. Is that coming out of the general fund, or where is that huge jump?
That's spread throughout the funds as a fringe benefit charge.
Okay. And then I think my last question is in regards to, as commissioners look at these graphs, I mean, I think it's extremely important when we look at our pension plans, whether you're looking at, defined benefit, the retiree healthcare plan, or the retiree healthcare trust, where we were in some situations 10 years ago to where we are today, and the increase in the decisions that were made years ago to make sure that we are fully funded. In regards to the investment strategies for all three of these, Steve, are they consistent across the board?
Yes. Well, for the retiree healthcare plan for General Sheriff and Martha Seabury, I call it the county retiree healthcare plan. In the pension fund, yes. The roads retiree healthcare plan is with MERS. So they have a different strategy. I don't know exactly how it differs from ours, I'll say, but they're invested in a whole different plan with the state.
Okay. In their strategy, I'm just looking at, their increase from 2006, which was 0% to 127.4 in 2020. I mean, that's a huge increase. Who's
It is.
managing their
They've been
money?
over contributing. So as pension contributions have gone down, they basically say we have a pool of money to fund these two programs. If one goes up, the other one goes down, or one goes down, the other one goes up. So they've been overfunding for a number of years. So that's how they've gotten into that position.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, I think we are done with the initial budget presentations. Commissioners, you also have on your desk, thank you, Steve.
You're welcome. Thank you. Again, if you have any questions, have Kyle or Adriana or Crystal, whoever, reach out to my office. We'll get you answers you need.
We appreciate that. Commissioners, on your desk, you also have some information that we've internally compiled. If you have any questions on this, talk with Kyle, referencing some of variances in different departments and categories, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have any questions with that, please talk to Kyle. We have a motion on the floor. We have to vote.
Motion passes 13-0.
Okay, next item is public participation. This is an opportunity for public participation for those who would like to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes on any issue. Would anyone from the public like to speak? Going once, twice. We'll close public participation. Next is commissioner comments. Commissioner Lucido.
Yeah, I just really quick wanted to congratulate Ms. Wallace on getting nominated to be second vice chair of the Michigan Association of Counties. That's all I have.
Well done. Seeing no other speakers? Motion to adjourn. Made by Romano, supported by Zinner. Please vote. Thank you, commissioners.